Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960 AM. Every Monday through Friday, I come to you at 6 o'clock with some interesting people, and I've got someone interesting to chat with you tonight. Cameron Piron is the president of Synaptive Medical. It's a medical device company. They do brain surgery equipment. We're going to hear more about this company and what they're all about. We're going to talk about how they're faring during COVID-19. We're going to talk about what they've been doing from a medical equipment standpoint. We're going to talk about the health of the medical device, medical equipment, medical technology business here in Canada. So Cameron, how are you? Thank you for joining us.
Very good. Yeah, thank you for making time and appreciate the chance to speak to you.
So tell me, what is Synaptive Medical? You specialize in what?
So we're a medical device and robotics company. So we're really focused around better imaging and making sure that imaging is available for guiding treatments and therapies. So brain surgery is a big area. We've been able to really bring better imaging to the surgeon, have guided approaches that are personalized for patients. And that approach is becoming quite big in medical imaging, is the idea of presenting better personalized information to make the best decision for the right patient.
So is this a better MRI or a better something rather than an MRI?
We've actually developed a line of products. They can be used on their own or they can be used as a single unified system. And our most recent product is in fact an MRI. So we built an MRI from the ground up. It's the most sophisticated imaging equipment in medicine, and we built it here in Toronto. So
excellent. So tell everyone what MRI is, magnetic resonance imaging?
That's right. So it's arguably the most sophisticated way to image in medicine. There's no radiation, but they're very expensive pieces of equipment. So you create a very big magnetic field that you go into. And if you've ever had an MRI, you'd associate it with kind of a long tube that you go into, and there'd be a lot of loud noises associated with imaging. And that's turning on and off fields and gradient fields. So it's a powerful way to harness the power of magnetic resonance to be able to image soft tissue in the body. So you can see really good delineation between different tissues. It's fantastic to image the brain. You can see all the white matter tracks and all the structures in the brain in ways that it would be very difficult or impossible to do any other way.
And how have you improved upon a typical MRI machine?
Well, our team actually is our second startup company. Our first one, we focused on part of the MRI. We built antennas that would improve the signal performance of a standard MRI system. We built that equipment for GE and Siemens and Toshiba, and then sold that company. And we took the proceeds of that and our experience to actually build an entire MRI system. So it's the first time it's been done in Canada. And doing that, kind of focusing from the antenna backwards, we developed a very different type of MRI, an MRI that's much smaller, but extremely high performance. And we focused that on brain imaging.
Now, when you say smaller, so when I had my MRI, I went into this tube. It felt like I was going into a coffin almost. So it was quite a big unit. If it's even smaller, I think I'd be claustrophobic. So what's the benefit of your machine?
Yeah, it's unfortunate. Coffin is the term that's associated with MRI, and we want to change that. So a typical MRI is about 3 meters long. It's a bore size or inner diameter of about 60 centimeters, 70 centimeters. So you go in that, it's fairly tight fitting. And they're massive systems. They're 10, 20, 70,000 pound systems. So these are huge infrastructure projects, and it costs a lot to site these systems. We took a different approach. So we created a superconducting magnet, but without using helium. So it lets you actually shrink the size of the system. Ours is about 1 meter in size instead of 3 meters. It's about 2,000 pounds instead of 10 to 20,000 pounds. So with this system, just your head goes in. And so we developed a technology, an asymmetric magnet design that lets you actually just have a bit of your head into the magnet. So your whole body stays outside the magnet. So it's a pretty huge innovation. And
any risk to the head as you put your head in this unit?
No, it's one of the benefits of imaging how we do. It's a 0.5 Tesla magnet. So it's a lower field magnet, which means any heating that could be associated with MRI is about 9 times less of a standard magnet. And it's much better imaging around devices. So there's more people with devices in them today, pacemakers, flow diverters, shunts, all these devices that open up vessels or bypass troublesome areas in the vascular structures, or pain stimulators or deep brain stimulators. This is a really big area in medicine, and it's hard to image around those devices. So another benefit of our system is you can actually safely image around a lot of these devices. So it's really bringing harnessing the power of MRI in a smaller platform at a lower cost, but with the performance that radiologists would be used to.
We're chatting tonight with Cameron Piron, who is the president of Synaptive Medical device company that's developed a smaller MRI for brain surgery, brain images. Stay with us. We're going to take a quick break and come back more with Cameron in just a minute. Stay with us. Well, we're back with Cameron Piron, the president of Synaptive Medical, a Canadian-based company that is specializing in MRI, magnetic resonance imaging devices for brain imaging and brain surgery. Cameron, tell me a little bit about your company. So where are you located?
So we're located at Richmond and Bathurst, so right downtown. We're in a building that used to house a lot of manufacturing for textile industry, and now it's a med device. There's quite a few other medical device companies in our building as well.
Excellent. And I understand you used to be associated or are associated with Mars?
We were, yeah. We spun out of my house to Mars when we were about 3 people, and grew to about 80 people. And really, as we started needing to ship more product, we really needed to get a spot with proper loading docks and big facility for manufacturing. So it was a good move for us.
Downtown Richmond and Bathurst doesn't sound like the right location for R&D facilities.
It's true, except a lot of our employees are actually software focused. So engineering is absolutely key to what we do, and we support really one of the best engineering teams in the world from a software electrical engineering perspective. So being in an environment that's really stimulating and exciting and attracts the best and brightest, being downtown is a huge asset.
Are you on the market now, or are you in the approval process?
We are on the market, so we have several products, and our first product hit the market about 5 years ago. And it's a product that's a software product that lets you look at all the connections in the brain, uses imaging from today's MRI systems. There's about 50,000 of them out there, process the data, and then we provide that to the surgeons. So we have over 100 of those installed today. We then launched a robotic system that was really a brand new concept of driving optics with a robot, linking it to your preoperative plan. That system's called Modus V, and we've ran 3 different generations of that product, launching our most recent one just in January. And it's a 3D imaging modality that links up preoperative imaging and what they're seeing in real time in surgery. So we have about 60 systems in the world, all around the world, many of them in the US, but we do have product in Australia, Europe, we're in Netherlands, we're in UK, we're in Switzerland, and we even have systems in Pakistan, Vietnam, and Thailand.
Fantastic. And what type of approvals do you need to do that? Are you FDA approved, Health Canada approved, or what's the status?
Yeah, we have a very important certification called MDSAP. So it's a single audit program for the quality system. So in medical, you have a balance between a quality system that really dictates how you operate, and then regulatory approvals and licenses that you sell individual products. So we have MDSAP designation that lets us have access to many of the countries in the world. And then each product needs its own certification in each country. And so we have...
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh yeah, we have certifications for our products in most of Europe, Southeast Asia, Australia, Canada, US, and just recently got approval for our MRI system in April for the US, and just before that in Canada.
Awesome. Congratulations. So I was at Wayne State University in Detroit, and met with this guy who showed me a 3D image of the brain. And it was like shining in the space in front of us in a room, and you could rotate it and you could see every blood vessel in the brain. Is that what you're doing with your 3D imaging? Yes,
that very well could have been our system. We have a system at Detroit Medical Center in Detroit. So that we do imaging of the vascular structures and on all the white matter network of the brain as well. So, you know, the brain's about 80 billion neurons, and some of the most important structures are the connectivity of those neurons in the brain. And MRI can actually image them by just watching the movement of the water molecules. So the water molecules just trace out these structures in the brain, and you get these just absolutely beautiful maps of your specific brain connectivity, which is probably a lot more identifying than your fingerprints.
Really? So everyone's brain is slightly different?
Everybody's brain's slightly different, and it changes. I mean, you actually can image the plasticity of somebody's brain. So it's quite rewarding when you get a really great neurosurgery procedure. You can see not impacting those fibers, and often seeing a lot of them recover after a tumor or a clot's removed in the brain. So you can actually measure quantitatively how that patient's recovering, and that's really defining the next wave of neurosurgery.
So this one example that I was referring to, they were looking for gray matter in the brain that was blocking the vascular system and causing problems. And then what they were showing is over time is people's brains actually grew new veins to find different ways of what do you call it, draining the blood out of the brain and taking it back to the heart. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it sure does. I mean, there's a plasticity there between the changing of your white matter, your neurons, your gray matter, the vessels of your brain, and also the lymphatics. So this has been a really interesting discovery fairly recently, is that the brain actually has a complex system for removing waste. And now we're starting to understand that. And I think imaging that is going to be a really important next generation benefits of imaging, to be able to really make sure you're getting the inflow into the brain and the waste products removed. There's a lot of people hypothesizing that that could be associated with degenerative disease. So if you're not really getting waste products removed from your brain properly, you could get a buildup of toxicity.
Well, this was this proposal, which was that it was iron deposits in the brain that weren't being drained properly, were causing gray matter instead of white matter, causing the death of parts of the brain, and were causing muscular dystrophy.
Yeah, that's fairly new understanding of the brain. You know, it's interesting where every decade they seem to say it's the decade of the brain, and this is probably more than ever the real decade of the brain, and an understanding of how it operates. And there's this entire systems that we just have overlooked, and so you start piling on the understanding of these different concepts, and you just have a totally new understanding, and hopefully that understanding can help us address all these ailments of the brain that are so crucial.
So one of the things that people have been talking about recently in regards to COVID-19 is that not only does it impact the respiratory system, but it impacts the vascular system. And through its impact to the vascular system, it's causing long-term negative cognitive impacts. Have you got anything involved in that? Are you doing any brain scans of people with COVID-19? Have you found any reasons why the vascular system would be causing negative cognitive impacts?
Yeah, this is a really fascinating area. I think there's a quick understanding change from thinking of it as a pulmonary disease to being really a full system vascular attack in patients. Our partner, actually, our first installation is in Dalhousie in Halifax, and the installation of the magnet is just by their emergency room. So one area of research focus was the use of MRI for stroke. And one of the benefits of MRI is you can pick up very small clots in a way that you can't pick up with any other imaging modality. So there's a whole spectrum of clots and vascular issues in the brain. It can range from what you call a transischemic attack, which would be a very small clot that kind of comes and resolves itself. A larger one would be an ischemic stroke. So you have a larger vessel that's occluded, and then you see cell death downstream. And you can actually image that cell death using MRI, or you can image the swelling of cells. So you can see cells at risk in a way that you can any other way. And so we're very excited about showing the use of our system for that application. And the system was being installed in February. And so, of course, COVID came. That kind of research had to slow down, but they received a grant to actually look at using our MRI for COVID patients. So the ability to actually image patients that are suffering from COVID. And some of the benefits of our system is you can image patients who would be potentially ventilated. So we have a smaller fringe field. So if the patient's transported properly, you can actually image patients who would be in acute phases of COVID. And of course, they did a fabulous job to really push that curve down in Nova Scotia. So COVID, this project to really look at COVID patients in acute phase is now changing to really looking at longer term effects of COVID in patients. And it's vascular. I think you're going to find a lot of similarities to stroke. There's a lot of great centers out there that have published a lot of research. Thomas Jefferson University and in a lot of the hospitals in New York, looking at actually treating some of these major clots in an exact same way that they're treating clots in patients today with stroke. So I think we're at the very early phases of understanding this kind of second wave of potential impact in these COVID patients who have had.
So what you're saying is that the impact of COVID-19 is not just on the respiratory system and the ability to breathe, but on the vascular system causing clots that would be effectively akin to a stroke.
That's exactly what they're finding. Yeah.
Unbelievable. That's incredible.
Yeah. So it's this is where imaging can really play an important role. So there's kind of many different acute pathways a patient can take with COVID. It may be major brain inflammation. It could be clotting, maybe even be hemorrhaging. So a quick scan of the patient at the right time can really help triage these patients. So we're always hungry for more information of how to manage this disease, and MRI could play a very major role.
So the MRI is showing what when it images the brain? Just the veins and the arteries, or is it showing more than that?
MRI, what's really interesting about it, it's actually a quantum effect. You're actually imaging energy molecules going from low to higher energy state. And based on that, you can see real complexities in soft tissue. And you can also inject contrast agents that let you better visualize the vascular system. So you can image the vascular system, you can image the arteries, the veins, you can image really slow flow, which is what you would see in lymphatic systems, or you would actually see in capillaries, or very slow flow, which you'd call diffusion, which is a random movement of water that lets you help trace out these structures. So in a healthy brain, you'd see a lot of connections, you'd see a lot of water movement and complexity. If you see a tumor, you see a large stroke, it actually disrupts that natural flow of water in the brain.
So the neurons that connect, that we're told are the brain power of the brain, do you see that with an MRI?
What you're able to see is the water moving on the outside of the neurons. So it's kind of wicking along the outside as a bit of a mechanism, that natural mechanism of the brain. So you're actually seeing the space outside of the neurons. And that's how you're able to create these images and traces of the neurons in the brain.
Awesome. Must be unbelievably interesting software technology that you're turning this information about movement of water into a picture, an image of the brain.
It is. It's interesting. Canada's long been a leader in MR science, but we've never really been a leader in terms of companies to take this science and actually express it into products. And I hope we're just going to represent the first wave of what can be done there.
We're chatting tonight with Cameron Piron, who is the president of Synaptive Medical, a brain imaging company that's developed MRI and robotics and things like that for the brain. We're going to take a break and come back more with Cameron in just a minute. Stay with us. Well, welcome back to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour in Saga 960. We're chatting tonight with Cameron Piron, who is the president of Synaptive Medical, a medical device company here in Toronto, Richmond and Spadina. Richmond and Bathurst, I think you said, downtown. Used to be associated with the Mars Center at University and College. Now branched out with 80 people, developing the software and the hardware for these products that are imaging of the brain for brain problems. We've talked about COVID-19. We've talked about strokes. We've talked about vascular systems. It's been a fascinating conversation. Cameron, let's change tracks just for a second. Are you private or public, the company?
We're private and certainly interested in being a public company. Yeah.
And you've been around for, you said, 5 years?
7 years.
7 years. And what's it like getting started? You started out, you said, in your basement, and then you went to Mars. Then you moved into this facility that other medical device companies are in. Tell me the sort of the stage process of your evolution.
Yeah, so we've we started out with ambitions to just do software and for medical imaging, and really spending a lot of time with the clinicians and looking for problems. And we just keep on uncovering opportunities to bring new technology to bear. So we started out with, I think, a fairly modest view of what we wanted to do. And the more we dug in, we saw bigger and bigger opportunities. So we continued to kind of expand our scope of what we could do and what we could achieve. And so now we're at a point where all of our markets, our products are ready for market, and really at a unique point where we're looking to be a scaled up company. And so partnerships are really important for us now. And we're really intending to be what I think is fairly unique in Canada, a big anchor, term we like to use, kind of anchor company in medtech. So if you look to the US, there's, Medtronic and there's GE. You go to Netherlands, there's Philips, Germany, Siemens, but you can't really identify that big medtech company in Canada. And I think it's really important we have that. We just saw that going through COVID, everyone scrambling to get ventilators together, needs for imaging, needs for drugs. And it's really important we have a very healthy and vibrant med tech community in Canada. So we've long been striving to be that big company. And certainly there's a lot of great opportunities to do that in Canada, but there's certainly a lot of challenges as well.
So people always talk about Series A, Series B, Series C. What kind of number of series of financings have you done?
We're currently completing what we call our series, is officially Series B, but it's really kind of our 5th or 6th major financing.
Okay.
So our intent is this is the last one, and we intend to be a profitable company after this.
And can you tell me how much you've raised over those 5 financing, or is that confidential?
Yeah, no, we can talk about that. Yeah, it's, over $200 million of financing in Canada, and that's significant. So that's we've taken on very big projects. We've taken on building of an MRI. We've taken on robotics projects that on their own would constitute, I think, a very big medtech company. And doing it in synergy and bringing that together is certainly kind of double ambitious. But we did it because we think the value of the integration of the technologies is going to bring really definitive value clinically and economically to hospitals.
And you said you'd like to go public. What's the route? Are you going to do an IPO in Canada, the United States, do an RTO? What's your plan?
Yeah, we'd love to be a publicly traded company on the big exchanges in the US. We've spent the last couple of years telling our stories at large investment banking conferences and getting an excellent response. And I think the MRI approval is a really important moment for us. It's something a lot of the big banks really thought would be a pivotal moment, is us getting that technology out there and showing the benefit that it could actually bring. So we're doing that now. So like any company, you want to get predictable revenue streams. And in the time of COVID, that's a challenge for everybody.
And why go public in the United States? Why not Canada?
We're certainly interested for that too. I think in terms of liquidity, there's a lot more in the US, there's a lot more attention. But at the same time, we see the Canadian med tech market continuing to grow. So making sure that as a member of that community, we're helping all boats rise is really important for us too. But the more established, bigger market in the US is certainly an important target for us, just due to the attention it gets from really the biggest names in investment.
So some people think that, you can start out in Canada, but to be really successful, you're going to have to ultimately move to the United States, that the private equity firms or the venture capital firms or the big institutions can demand that you move to New Jersey or somewhere where the medtech business is prevalent in the States. What do you think about that? Can you stay in Canada?
Yeah, we fully intend to stay in Canada. We have a big presence in the US. We have a lot of employees in the US supporting customers and innovating with our customers. We have a lot of very important customers and partnerships in the US. But Canada offers a really unique location for us. The talent that we get from Canadian universities is fabulous. We get a lot of diverse skill sets and talents. So we have a very diverse group of innovators in our company. And that's pretty unique to Toronto. And you see that as a tremendous strength. So in the world of MRI, in the world of medical devices, there's long been a long investment in these technologies. And that's what you need. You need a long investment to really yield tangible results in MRI in particular. And that's been done. Our partners in Canada are really some of the best MR partners in the world and surgical partners. So it's a good environment to create innovation. But at the same time, you need the infrastructure for funding and help scaling these companies. And unfortunately, a lot of that is in Minnesota and increasingly in Silicon Valley. So a lot of people have, that some of the biggest companies in medical technology today are actually in Palo Alto. In fact, there's a couple of brilliant Waterloo engineers that I had the opportunity to do an early investment in, and they went to Palo Alto first thing, and they've been able to create a technology that's really groundbreaking in the Valley. And their path for funding is probably a little easier than a Canadian company being in Toronto, but it's
because of all the VC money in Palo Alto.
Yeah, you just go down the road, go to the famed Sandhill Road, and you'll fall into a half dozen world-class healthcare specialized VCs, and the community is growing in Canada. It's certainly fundamentally different than when I started my first company, where there was very little support, and now you're seeing a lot more. So I think as you're seeing more and more success stories in medtech in Canada, I think you're going to see a lot more funding. You're going to see a lot more specialized funds. So we're not there yet, but we're a good part of the way. It's certainly very different than the last 10 years.
So the 200 million you've raised so far, is that from Canadian funds or US funds, or a mix?
It's a mix. It's a mix of US funds, investors from the UK, some international investors, but for the most part, this is funded through Canadians.
Fantastic. So I did a roadshow on Sandhill at one point in time, and Bang 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 had numerous different meetings. It was extremely efficient. Did a similar roadshow in New York and a similar roadshow in Boston, and they were all spread out all over the place, and so not nearly as efficient. So there really is something about that concentration of not only the companies but the money. Are we ever going to get that in Toronto?
Sure, hope so. I think we have enough innovation to get there. I think there's been such big innovative technologies coming out. There's no reason that can't be translated into big scalable companies. So I know there's a lot of focus on that. I think it's been exciting seeing a lot of focus simply on startups, and now you are hearing the term scale ups more and more. It's that opportunity to get a company to scale, and I think that's where we're really going to see a shift in the economy.
You talked about your first company. What was that, and what area was it in, and what happened to it?
So first company was called Sentinel Medical, and I founded it out of grad school. So I built a technology that was unique. It was for using MRI for detection of breast cancer. And at that time, it was a very, very expensive way to image patients, but early inklings that it could be much more sensitive to be able to detect more breast cancers than mammography. And so I had the honor to work with a really fabulous team at Sunnybrook Hospital, great oncology group, great radiology group, and they really framed the problem in a way that an engineer could come in and do what engineers do, is pull technology together to solve a problem. And we did that. We built a technology that would let you screen for breast cancer, biopsy small tumors, and then software to analyze the data. And really, when those three elements came together, we had a system that could really scale to multiple hospitals. So you could take that capability to screen for breast cancer, do an intervention under MR guidance, and do an analytics of those data sets. So it was very, very rewarding, very early days. Pioneering work came out of Ontario to show that it was beneficial for screening of very high-risk patients with what they call BRCA1 and 2 mutations, so high propensity for breast cancer, and actually cells that are sensitized to radiation, and showed that MRI was beneficial in that population. So good clinical support.
Most of those people are doing genetic testing to find out whether they have what do you call it, genetic predisposition to breast cancer.
That's right, yeah, and there's been quite a few very famous celebrities who have made their stories and their battles with being a BRCA1 or 2 positive public, and kind of how they've dealt with that. Because you can imagine a heavy burden. You're told you have a genetic propensity, and then at that time there was really no other option to really monitor these patients. So there was a sense of urgency to see what we could do to bring technology to help these patients. Technology can often be a double-edged sword. So you tell somebody you're at a high propensity, but then you don't do anything about it. So it felt like an urgency to make sure we had the technology to detect the cancer and be able to actually follow up with intervention with these patients as
So
well.
help me if you could. The standard of care right now would be a mammogram.
Standard of care, general population is a mammogram, and it's very effective.
And what is it? So it's not an MRI. It's like an ultrasound.
It's for mammography, it's an X-ray. And
X-ray.
that technology's evolved, and now they do what they call kind of CT or tomography, so multiple view X-ray to be able to see around dense tissue. And that's been tremendously helpful in patients, and that's become the new standard of care for patients generally. But in specialized groups of patients, they benefit from MRI.
Why would the MRI be better?
It images differently. So X-ray looks at density of tissue. And if you have a very dense breast, often it's hard to differentiate between tumors in those patients and normal tissue. So tumors can be obscured in that tissue. And it happens to be BRCA1 and 2 patients tend to develop breast cancer earlier. If they develop it earlier, tend to have denser breasts. So it's easier for a tumor to hide in the tissue. So MRI is able to image the vascularity of a tumor. So you're actually able to see the blood flow going to part of the overactive cells that might be associated with malignant or benign tissue. So it's very, very specific to detecting cancer. So the challenge has been, it's been expensive. So that's where a lot of the effort's been to reduce costs.
And so tell me, what did you do with the company? Did you sell it, or what happened to it?
We funded it privately, and at that time there was certainly a lot less. I can say there's no way we could have raised 200 million in Toronto at that time. And we started in 2004, and we sold the company in 2010. And heavy hearts, because we built up a really spectacular team with a long vision of what we could do. We were applying the technology to prostate and seeing a similar opportunity to screen for men's cancers. But we received an offer that just made a lot of sense for us at the time. I think if there was more funding available, we would have pushed everything to that next level. But for a kind of a company that was making part of an MRI, we were a little bit restricted in what we could do next. We were making part of it, and we had to follow the market lead of companies like GE and Siemens. And we really felt it was an opportunity to kind of reset everything and really think about MRI in a totally different way, which is what we've done today.
So I had someone tell me that they thought that pharmaceuticals was the sort of the healthcare opportunity for the last generation. And I think the number was that healthcare dollars out of all healthcare dollars, about 15% of them went to pharmaceuticals in like 1950s, 1960s, and it grew to about 50% of all healthcare dollars today are spent on pharmaceuticals. And they said that medical devices and digital health are going to be that kind of opportunity in the next generation of healthcare. Do you agree?
I totally agree. And I'd actually think that it's actually the combination, which is really going to be the powerful element. So maybe I'll reflect back to what we did in breast cancer. And one of the things we did was part of a program called I-SPY 2, which came out of UCSF in San Francisco. The idea was to look at later stage tumors in patients. So stage 4 tumors, so they're very advanced. And something you often don't look at when you're focused on screening to find small tumors. But instead using MRI as a way to measure the response of a tumor to chemotherapy. So instead of quickly sending a person to surgery, the concept is image the patient, try different doses of chemotherapy, look at the tumor and see how that tumor is responding. Shrink the tumor, go to surgery, and then you can follow up with the chemotherapy works for that patient. So one of the challenges with cancer is it's very heterogeneous. If there's one type, one genetic change in the whole tumor, it'd be a lot easier to manage. But very complex tumors, including high-grade brain tumors, there's a lot of genetic variation. So you're attacking almost many different types of tumors in the body. So the importance of actually two things, debulking the tumor in surgery, and then getting the appropriate follow-up, whether it's chemotherapy or radiation treatment, is really the concept of personalizing care for a patient. And the more information you have about that tumor and that patient, the more personalized you can deliver care.
So what you're really saying is that the medical device can work in concert with the pharmaceutical product.
That's it. That's exactly it. I think we're seeing barriers coming down between just blindly delivering a certain drug for patients, for oncology or even neurology. psychiatric conditions, and using imaging to help guide those decisions and see whether it's working for patients. So I think you're absolutely right. Med device is going to grow, pharmaceutical is going to grow, but the combination of the two is where we're really going to find very smart care delivery.
We're chatting tonight with Cameron Piron. He is the president of Synaptive Medical, a Toronto-based medical device company specializing in imaging, MRI imaging of the brain. Stay with us. We're going to have one last break and then come back with some concluding comments. Well, an interesting conversation tonight with Cameron Piron, the president of Synaptive Medical, medical device company here in Toronto. And we're talking about brain and brain imaging and MRI. But we've also talked about breast cancer and breast imaging, and it's been really quite interesting. Cameron, what's the future of the brain?
Yeah, I think, now we're understanding all interesting processes in the brain, as we mentioned, the ability to deliver vessels delivering nutrition to cells, lymphatics delivering waste. We're able to see that the brain's plastic, that it changes over time. And we're now able to put numbers to these areas. So we're really moving to quantitative brain imaging. So you can really look at a brain over time and see how it's changing and seeing how you can impact it. And now there's a lot of new ways to impact the brain. So there's things like deep brain stimulators that you can put in the brain to kind of pulse the brain from inside out. It's an evolution of cardiac pacemakers. There's the ability to modify with different drugs. There's ability to modify with things like focused ultrasound and even transmagnetic stimulation. So we're finding all these minimally invasive ways and targeted ways to impact the brain. And I think it's really that puzzle of being able to look at the ways to treat the brain, understand how you image it and how the patient's responding. So just early innings for that. I mean, it's just so exciting because it's been fairly blind in the way that we treat the brain, particularly in psychiatric conditions. And now we'll have numbers, we'll have metrics, much like a cardiologist is able to have a stethoscope, and that evolved into ultrasound where you get quantitative measures of how the heart's beating, the pump, the efficiency of blood pumping. And now we're just going to start having quantitative metrics with the brain. It's going to be exciting because we can really impact a lot of these devastating diseases. And
you mentioned during the break, Elon Musk made a recent announcement.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting. We look at all these it's hard to keep up with all the technology announcements. And Elon Musk started a company called Neuralink, and very ambitious. So the idea is that you can start linking in electronically with each of the individual neurons of the brain, and very ambitious effort. And it's along the line of this concept of DBS, where you can pace the brain and you can measure the brain. And his thought is you're really interconnecting with virtually every different track of the brain and creating a interface in the brain with electronics directly. And so he's caused quite a bit of stir. I've been enjoying looking on LinkedIn and looking at the comments of neuroscientists. So it's a big tug of war whether this approach is going to work, and of course looking at the ethics of it as well. But ambitious tech people are now looking at the brain. I think it's good. I think we're going to see a lot of technology evolving into medicine that otherwise wouldn't.
You've had experience with at least 2 companies now. What advice would you have for young startup entrepreneurs that want to be in the medical device business? Any lessons learned?
The one piece of advice I got early that I'd say is more true than anything. You've got to pick what you absolutely love, because you're going to go through hardship that you can't even imagine as you're trying to scale a company. And if it doesn't, the passion of the technology and the science doesn't just stimulate you completely, then you probably shouldn't, because there's going to be a lot of challenges from fundraising, regulatory, you name it. There's the gambit, and you need to run the gambit, and you need to have your eyes on something that's truly motivating. And that's why medical healthcare technology is so motivating, because there's that intrinsic value that's there driving you. And the challenges are greater, but the rewards are greater too.
Well, it's been a pleasure chatting with you, Cameron Piron, the president of Synaptive Medical tonight. If people want to sort of track your progress, have you got a website that you can tell us about?
Yep, we do, synaptivemedical.com, and reach out to me on LinkedIn as well. And that's a great way to connect with everybody. So
well, pleasure chatting. It's been a pleasure chatting with you tonight about the brain and about imaging and about your company, Synaptive Medical. Thank you so much for what you're doing. And I hope that you actually get your equipment used more in some COVID-19 testing, because I think there's a huge opportunity there. Anyway, Cameron, Piran, thank you so much for joining us. That's Brian Crombie for the Brian Crombie Radio Hour. Good night, everybody.